Hasn't it been a little slow with the presentations here today? Don't worry, we will solve this now. What we are doing is putting match to fossil fuels. And we have just sold 2 robotized production lines. We have 2 solar heating plants for multinationals. We have agreements with 7 of the world's largest food and beverage companies. And we can today also produce how we can have 100% solar heat and hydrogen solution. We are listed on Spotlight Next, but our core competence is the world's most efficient solar concentrator with 76% efficiency. And we have 88 patents pending or granted. But what we sell is a robotized production line that can mass produce the solar collector. And this we do together with ABB. The third thing that we do is that we cooperate with the world's largest food and beverage companies. And you will hear more about this. Some climate introduction. We are working to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees. And to do that, we need to have net zero emissions in the second half of this century. Luckily, all the 197 countries of the world has agreed to this. But to do that, we need to cut the CO2 emission by half every decade. You know this. You want Rockström stuff. This is what IPCC has decided to put as a roadmap. Go from 40 today to 20 in 2030, to 10 megaton in 2030, and to 5 megaton in 2050. So the fossil fuel need to reduce like this, but at the same time, the energy consumption will increase. More people want to have nice jackets and the cars and air conditioning. So we have this big gap in between that we need to fill with renewable energy and then primarily solar energy. At the same time, as we are going to surf down this CO2 from the fossil fuel, we are going from being 8 billion people on Earth and 1 billion who are well off to get 10 billion people on Earth and 4 billion who have the same living standard than us. So the global economy will increase 4 times. But already today, when 1 billion people is living this life, we are consuming more resources than what the Earth can provide. If we just would upscale this 4 times, there's no way the ecosystem would survive. So we need to redesign how we do clothes, how we do food, how we do energy. And here we have 3 things that humanity need: electricity, transport, and heat. And now you know it, should we say it all together? 20% heat, 30% transport, 50% heat. So heat is half. Here we have it, like this. So if it's something I want you to bring from today is this picture and this logo that you will see around. So everything we consume is made by heat. The textile, the cheese, the beer. But if we want to go then to have a 0 CO2 emission dairy, how do you do this? Well, the dairy plant, it has 1/4 of the energy consumption is electricity, and 3/4 are heat. Basically steam that comes from a big oil burner in the back of the dairy plant. The electricity, the multinationals have already solved. They basically lift the receiver and call their electricity provider and ask them to build some wind power that they could partly pay for, so they get the green electricity. So most of the multinationals, they today have 100% renewable electricity, which is fantastic. Sometimes this is mixed up so that they say like we have 100% renewable energy. But it's only the electricity that they have solved. The 3/4 that is heat is still coming from their old oil boiler in the back of the brewery plant. But this we can replace by having concentrated solar that produce the steam that the brewery needs. When you ask the big international energy agencies, IRENA and IEA, what this transition from oil burner to solar thermal will look like for those industries, they say that, well, this will be a market of up to 2050, $1 trillion. And it's both IRENA and IEA for some different reports. But today, this is a super small market, and the multinationals have not yet started this transition on the heat sector. Our solution is to provide concentrated solar energy. We focus the light, like with a magnifying glass, up to 160 degrees, and provide this steam to replace the fossil steam that they are using today. We are super proud of this collector. It's a product made of steel and glass that follow the sun during the day to produce this 160-degree hot steam. And we are looking at making hundreds of millions of square meters of those solar collectors. When we do that, it's of course important that we don't destroy the world's climate while building the solar collector, isn't it? But luckily, we have, by using life cycle analysis in the start of the company, taken away all the parts that has big CO2 impact. So a normal PV panel, it has about 40 grams per kilowatt hour when it produces electricity. But our panels, we only have 8 grams per kilowatt hour when we produce renewable heat. So we can make those hundreds of millions of square meters without destroying the climate. Also, if you look at other, like eutrophication of water, the ozone layer depletion, ecotoxicity, we also get much better. So the small yellow piece is the solar collectors, and the grayish, brownish is the oil and gas. We have protected our solution with no less than 88 patents, pending or granted. And we also, of course, have model design protection, and you have in China utility models, and we also protect the brand. And now we build this kind of small installations around the world where we demonstrate how the solar collector can produce steam for different applications. Those are quite small installations compared to what they will look like in the future, but they are big enough to prove the technology and teach the customers how to operate them. This is Colgate-Palmolive. This factory makes this green washing detergent, Yes, for the whole of Europe. And our solar collectors provide 100% of the heat needed for one of the processes in the industry. So this is how we envision that the industries of the future will provide the heat. So our offer to the multinationals are industry powered by solar heat. And when I had presentations 1 year ago, I was super happy to be able to present this list. We have been able to sign with the 7 largest food and beverage companies in the world. We have signed a pilot installation with Carlsberg, a pilot installation with Asahi, a pilot installation with Daniel Midlands, a pilot installation with Anheuser-Busch InBev that has Budweiser. We have site feasibility studies with Pepsi. We have an accelerator with Coca-Cola. And we have one more on the left side who don't want to go public. So we have here a fantastic opportunity to help those companies go away from their fossil boilers. So that was 1 year ago. Okay, what happened in this year? Well, we built installations. So this is now Carlsberg's brewery, Olympic Brewery in Thessaloniki, when we have this installation. And this is Peroni, that is owned by Asahi, in Bari in Italy. So now we are producing solar steam for their breweries. And those are our lighthouse installations. They will show the world how you can run your brewery on solar heat. This installation is unique because we produce both the steam and the pressurized hot water. And the tank you can see in middle, it's a heat storage that makes it possible to run the brewery on solar heat both day and night. This is, of course, a fantastic progress for the multinationals and for Absolicon. And those installations in Greece and Italy will be the cornerstone of our marketing the coming year. And we're not really alone here. We got very good help from them. This is the annual environmental report of Carlsberg. I recommend you to read it. But because if you turn to page 8, it's a full page with Absolicon. And they are saying, we are brewing with the heat of the Greek sun. This is marketing you cannot buy. You know, all the multinationals, they read each other environmental reports and see what they should come up with to the next year. So I think we have now a really good thing going on with those 7 biggest food and beverage companies in the world. But what we sell is not the solar collectors. What we sell are the robotized production lines, because we want to have hundreds of millions of solar collectors, and we can never make them in Sweden and ship them around the world. So the big prize for Absolicon is, of course, to sell production lines, yes? And this we deliver with ABB that help us with service and supply. And we are the only company in the world that has a solution for a rapid rollout of this industrial technology. There are 6 stations with robots that you put in steel and glass in one end, and you get a ready solar collector in the other end every 6 minutes. And the revenues for Absolicon is the sales of the production line, the materials for the solar collectors, and the license revenue. Now, we have sold 2 production lines in December. Order value 86 million, 1 to Canada and 1 to Egypt, that we will have up and running in the beginning of next year. And here you get this explosive mix. We have the multinationals that have the need of solar thermal. We have our 2 pilot lighthouse installations with Carlsberg and Peroni that display that the technology works in the brewery. And we have the 2 sold production lines that prove that the local entrepreneur can make money out of selling solar collectors to the multinationals. And with this base now, we are ready for this rapid upscale that we've been working for since we were listed in 2017. What we're also doing is we're getting better and better in signing those production lines. This installation with Canada, it took 14 months to sign. In Egypt, it took 11 months to sign. And our goal is to have 6 months signing from we have the framework agreement with the provider until we have sold the production line at 40 million SEK. And the production lines we have very good profit on. I think a problem that renewable companies often have is that they sell a product that they have a bad margin. And the more they sell, the more money they lose. But that will not happen to us. We have a fantastic margin on the production lines. We can't tell because then the buyers would not pay as much as we charge them. So we have here a solution that actually puts Chasmet for fossil fuels. What does the market think? Well, these are the analyses that we got recently. It says here in Swedish that the calculated price could be 150 SEK on the share. This is another that says the valuation is very low. Here is a very nice from Affärsvärlden, putting a potential value of 1,000 million on Absolicon. And the last one is this from Kalkyl that we get as part of members of Spotlight that is on 140 SEK. So right now we are doing a right issue on 120 million SEK to be able to take those wins that we had this year with the pilots and the sold production lines and really to put this to the market. Also to continue building those lighthouse installations in other continents, and we still have some cost reduction to do on the soil collectors. So this was the warm-up. Now comes the interesting part. And to do that, I will start talking about little district heating. This is what it looks like in Sweden. Every red point here is a district heating network. So half of all the multifamily houses in Sweden are heated by district heating. And that is done today by burning waste or burning wood fuel, or some heat pumps from Siemens. But you can also run those district heating plants with a solar field and a seasonal heat storage that store the heat from summer to winter. This is the Danish city of Dronninglund that has done this since 2012. They just dig an enormous hole in the ground, fill it with 90-degree hot water, and put a lid on top. This is the city of Toftlund. Here you can actually see the pit before it's filled up with water. This is simple technology, and it can power cities and industries with heat that is stored from solar collectors from summer to winter. And this is what I referred to in the panel, a technology that stores energy 800 times cheaper than batteries. This technology we also think is suitable in Ukraine. They have 70% of their district heating on Russian gas. We think when they rebuild their cities, they will like to have solar thermal instead of Russian gas. What we have now is a concept that can provide heat from the solar collectors. But we also cooperate with different technology partners to give a 100% solution for those industries. And this is the first time I have this presentation in English about the outlook. So it's a little technical, excuse me for that. Today, we have a solution for the multinationals that they can have an electric boiler that replaces the fuel and solar collectors that provide part of the energy. And in principle, we say that they can get 20% of the energy need of this dairy plant or this brewery from the sun. But the electric boiler, you know, it's not a good thing. The electric grids of Europe is not strong enough to handle that all the industries would get electric boilers, and we would need a forest of windmills to power the electric boilers of the industry. So what we propose here is to have the Danish pit storages in the industry. So the excess heat from the solar collectors we would put in the heat storage. We could charge it with a heat pump, and we can also use a high-temperature heat pump, again, maybe from Siemens, to provide this 160-degree hot steam to the industry. So in this way, instead of just providing 20% of the heat, solar thermal can provide, together with heat pumps, all the heat that this brewery or dairy plant needs. And I think here, the thinking that the world is run on electricity can be shaken a little when we show that we can run the industries on solar thermal. Another thing that is happening now is this focus on hydrogen. And you know, hydrogen is traditionally thought to be produced from water, and you have true electrolytes. But an alternative technology that is coming very strong is what calls high temperature electrolysis, where you actually don't use water, but you use steam. So we can build a system where you take 20% of the energy from the steam that we produce very cheap and efficient in the solar collectors. So today you have an industry that then gets solar thermal from the solar collectors and electricity maybe from PV, and they want to have a hydrogen system with a hydrogen storage. The hydrogen system has only 50% efficiency, making hydrogen to electricity again. But all those things we can change. We start by using 20% steam to produce the hydrogen, and then we recover all the heat losses from the hydrogen system. So that all the electricity that is put into making hydrogen is not wasted, but it's recycled in the solar thermal system. It's combined with the pit storage to be able to provide a fully a system where all the energy is converted to either hydrogen or heat for the industry. So this is why we say that we have this checkmate for fossil fuel, that we can build systems now with concentrated solar collectors that both produce steam directly for the process, but we can also use those pit storages and store the solar heat from summer to winter and take with a heat pump the heat out of the storage and produce steam for the industry. And finally, we can provide 20% of the energy needed to make hydrogen or ammonia and also recover all the heat in the hydrogen process. And ammonia is interesting because those multinationals, when they are cutting down their CO2 emissions, they look at their entire value chain. So they also care about what fertilizers their farmers use. And you know, today, 1% of the world's CO2 emissions is coming from producing fertilizers. The main exporters are Russia and Saudi Arabia, making fertilizers out of natural gas. But it doesn't need to be that way. We can do ammonia and fertilizers using parabolic troughs that make steam and some renewable electricity. So this was a little bigger story with the technical side that not so many have heard of. The main core of Absolicon is to do those robotized production lines. And this with hydrogen and pit storages and heat pumps that we do together with technology partners. We recently signed an agreement with the Japanese company Kobelco to work with their high-temperature heat pumps in Europe. And we had good cooperation with several of the companies that provide those big pit storages. We actually have 5 million SEK in different government grants to work with pit storages in Sweden. So we are ready. We have the multinationals. We have our lighthouse installations. And we have sold 2 production lines. So it will be checkmate for fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. In terms of geography, is there an aspect here in what hemisphere we are looking at, installation-wise, in terms of heat and sun?
We are focusing now on the Mediterranean area, mainly because it's close to us and we have very good customers there. But actually, the solar installation is good enough everywhere in the world to run this kind of system. It can work also in Sweden. It's more depending on what politicians have decided with subsidies and such things. In US, the IRA now have very good conditions, and that is one of the reasons why we sold this production line to Canada. But we will focus mainly on Mediterranean area for the coming year.
So excuse the pun, but are there any clouds on your sky in terms of the future, or is it all sunny and bright? In terms of development here, what threats do you see?
I think the big challenge is still getting people to understand that the heat is half and that they need to look in the heat. But for the multinationals, they have already exhausted their ability to reduce the CO2 emissions because they took away the electricity. That was really easy for them. Now their commitments need to be met by reducing the burning in their own plants of fossil fuel. And that is tricky. So we need to convince them to start that.
And of course, this is also about communicating, because if you communicate that you are 100% renewable, but only you fail to communicate that it's only in the electricity part, it's greenwashing. So we need to keep an eye on the terminology here.
And journalists, they don't difference between energy and electricity. You see they all the time. They talk about the energy system when they mean the electricity system. Mm-hmm. But I would say this with clouds and challenges, it's to run this kind of company, growing this quick, building 2 installations in a year, that is challenging. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the technology will not give us problems. It's how we manage the company. This is the challenge, and to manage this growth and capital raises and everything.
Well, best of luck, Joachim, and thank you for the energy.
Thank you.